All right. So it has been a while. I wanted to speak on a topic today. I've been going through my own kind of spiritual awakenings and all these different kinds of revelations and different things like that. I had a whole experience that I've been going through. Um, I went to India for a little bit. I'm back here, so I'd like to start making more videos again. So here we go. So this video is going to be on what is karma, why is karma important to understand, and how does it link into your everyday experience and into a deeper reality. So, karma, as many people know, as the law of cause and effect, but it's much deeper than that. And it's not exactly the law of cause and effect in whole, because the word karma really means action. So, it refers to any action that you do, not just the act of cause and effect, but it's literally any action that you perform is a karma. And so everybody knows that every action that you do has some sort of reaction that you experience. Um, but in reality, though, you're actually moved by your karma to do everything that you do. And karma also comes into the act of free will as well. It has something to do with free will because, in truth, you aren't really free to do anything of your own will if you're being moved by your karma. Your karma is all the actions that you've done in the past that lead up to what you are right now. So, in reality, all of the things that you've done have led you to think in a particular way, to see the world in a particular way, to have ideas about how everything is, how other people are, and it comes into a space where it starts to create a mental identity which you play out as a human in your own ego identity. So basically, your ego is built up by all of the actions that you've performed, the ways that you thought, which are also actions in a different realm of consciousness, and then the different kinds of experiences that you've had. So for me, my karma led me into a lot of different ways of thinking, which brought me into a breaking down of my ways of thinking and a need to see in a different way. And when that happened, then the nature of my karma shifted in the sense that my way of seeing the world started to shift, and my actions according to my ways of seeing the world started to shift as well. That is a parent of what you would call good karma, but what it is just another reaction to another past event which I have done as well. So if the idea of past lives is true, then all of the actions that I've done in my own past lives have also led into the way that I'm thinking. And all of the different things that have happened in this life have led me into a particular way of seeing things, which is in reflection of all of the things that I've done in the past. So basically, going into it deeper, the nature of what karma is really is just actions that you do which cause a particular way of seeing reality. And it is possible to change your karma by changing your actions, but in truth, there it still is it is subject to the ways that you are capable of even seeing anything. So, on one level, you don't really have a free will if you're being moved by all of the compulsions and actions that you've done that lead you into seeing the world in some particular way. Because um, how could you freely make a decision if every single decision that you made is based on a previous decision that you made? So, really, the only way to be able to become free of karma is to become enlightened. And when the enlightenment happens, then there's a detachment from the self, the thought of the self. So there's a, like, when you live in a normal state of consciousness, you think, I am this person and I am doing this and this and this and this, right? You think that you are the one who's doing everything. In reality, though, if you look deeper into it, if all the scriptures that say that God is an infinite consciousness, or that God is this infinite, omniscient, omnipresent, omnipotent force, if that is all true, then that means that God is not only inside of everything, it is everything, because there's nothing else that can exist other than that. Infinity implies that there's no end, no beginning. It implies that when you think about something, that also is part of infinity, right? So if God is infinite, then it has to be everything that exists and more. So if you come to realize that God is ever present everywhere, then you'll also come to realize that God is inside of you too. All right? And so in reality, the ego, the mind, person thing that you think that you are is actually God being that thing inside of you. And as you think that you're doing everything, your ego is taking the identity of this, right? It's taking this on as it being the one who's doing things. But if you're able to detach from the ego and realize that it is God who is doing everything through you, then you can become detached from karma. Because what happens is that the karma of the action goes into God rather than going into yourself. So the response of that energy that you put out is, it comes back to you in a different way. The purity of the consciousness which performs the action will affect the way that the reaction comes back to you. So the more deeply that somebody is um, caught in their ego, the longer it's going to take for the karma that they put out to come back to them. Because there's a filter or a veil of consciousness which basically buffers that karmic reaction based on the unconsciousness of that individual person. So as the ego is let go of and it falls away more and more, the person receives back the energy that they put out quicker, in a more obvious manner. Because the ego is the thing that separates you from your experience, in a sense. So if you can identify everything as God doing everything through you, then your karma will become God's karma. God's karma is ever blissful, right? So every action that you do will become a blissful reaction, because when filtered through the ego of God, rather than the ego of the self, which God's ego is not an ego, it's an egoless ego, right? But like, that filter will purify the actions, and when they come back to you, they will come back in love, understanding, truth, and joy, rather than the energetic, either opposite or um, filtered experience that is attached to an ego. Um, Also, the purity of the ego, which is performing the actions, will affect the energy of the karma coming back to that person. And this is the thing about good karma and bad karma, is that neither is it good nor bad, it's just that we perceive it as good or bad inside of ourselves. reactions that come back to us that make us feel happy or good, then we consider that good karma. And then if it makes us suffer, then we consider it bad karma. So basically, the nature of karma itself, all it means is action. It's just the act of doing things. And then the natural recourse of that action coming back to you in some form of a emotional, spiritual, mental, or physical state. So the way to free yourself from karma is by attaching the actions to the purified consciousness. So as the purified consciousness takes on those actions, the actions themselves become pure in their essence and bring back a pure response. The self then starts to understand that it is a idea, the self, the mind, the ego identity is an idea in the mind, which is actually not real in its essence. The real reality of the essence of the ego is actually infinite consciousness, which is condensing itself into a perspective of an individualized entity. And that individualized entity then, which that entity actually is a portion of an infinite consciousness. It's basically like a partition in a hard drive. You have a whole hard drive which is infinite consciousness, and then you partition each one of these different portions of that consciousness in order to be able to have an experience of separation or difference. Because if you're fully identified with an infinite consciousness, there's no possible way to be able to have an experience of self and other. Because there's only self. And when there's only self, then it's impossible to be able to perceive another as being separate from that. So there's no catalyst for experience anymore. And this plays in also into positive and negative in polarization, because there's a necessity for both positive and negative, the same as in a battery, where you have a positive terminal and a negative terminal, and that creates a charge, right? So like the energy, the wave fluctuation between the two polarities causes vibration, which creates existence as a dual state. It creates duality. So karma really is just the vibration of duality playing itself through all actions, and it is resolved by realizing that both of the waves of karma, both of the energy polarities playing together create one consciousness, and then identifying your own consciousness with that infinite consciousness, that singular consciousness, then stops the waves of karma from reoccurring to the self, and it then reoccurs to the infinite self. And when that happens, then there's no identity of a person to experience a repercussion, because the identity is infinite. So no more is there waves, there is only a playing of energy, which is not perceived as being positive nor negative anymore. Therefore, the suffering incurred from thinking that something is good or bad falls away, because the identity is not taking on the state of identification with the actions that it's performing. So there's nobody there to suffer anymore. So it's a nobody creating waves in consciousness. So when that nobody receives the energy back, it has no charge to it, basically. So the way to free yourself from karma is to identify yourself with God, rather than identifying yourself with the small self, right? Or the higher self, if you want to call it that. But like, you basically identify yourself with a non polarized state of consciousness, which has no um, personal identification. And then the karma is able to spread through infinity rather than being directed back into an individual entity. You'll still receive energies, but your mind will not identify those as being positive nor negative. So the suffering that's incurred or the pleasure and pain that comes from identification with experience falls away, and then the identification falls into a, or rises really into a different way of seeing things where behind all of the waves of consciousness there is a self observing these different things, and that self is inherently blissful, joyous. Um, the nature of reality itself is love and joy and bliss, in the sense that the consciousness which creates everything does it out of what you would call love or joy or bliss, but what it is it's a natural state of your own self. And this is why everybody's seeking joy, happiness, and bliss, is because it's the natural state of what you are. And so as you feel separated from that, you suffer, because that suffering really is only just a separation from your own true self. And as you become closer to that true self, suffering falls away and joy, bliss, and love arise inside of